Genius Tiny Apartment Decorating Ideas, Real Brooklyn Home Tour. Welcome to my tiny slice of Brooklyn. If you've ever looked at a floor plan and wondered if the architect was joking, you're in the right place. We are standing in a space that most people would call a junior studio, but I prefer to call it a high-stakes puzzle. Today isn't just about showing you pretty furniture. It's about the emotional transition from feeling trapped by your walls to feeling hugged by them. Can we debunk the myth that more square footage equals more happiness? In my professional opinion, a small apartment forces you to be an editor of your own life. You can't hide clutter in a spare room because there isn't one. Every object here has to tell a story or solve a problem. Isn't there something incredibly liberating about only owning things that actually spark joy or serve a purpose? Let's look at this tiny patch of wall by the door. In a normal house, you'd have a mudroom, right? Here, we have 6 inches of clearance. I opted for a floating wooden ledge instead of a bulky console table. Why? Because seeing the floor continue underneath the furniture trickles the brain into thinking the room is wider. It's a simple visual lie that makes a massive difference the second you walk in. People always tell you to paint small rooms white, but I think that's a bit boring, don't you? In this Brooklyn unit, we went with a soft, dusty terracotta in the sleeping nook. It creates a sense of depth that stark white just can't achieve. By painting the back of the room a darker shade, the walls seem to push away from you rather than closing in. Here's a hot take. Do you actually need a massive 3-seater sofa? For this transformation, we ditched the traditional couch for 2 oversized, deep-seated velvet armchairs. It opens up the traffic flow of the room significantly. Now, instead of one giant block of fabric suffocating the floor, we have air moving between the pieces, making the whole apartment feel breathable. If you're still using that one overhead boob light that came with the apartment, we need to talk. Lighting is the cheapest way to renovate a rental. I've placed lamps at 3 different heights: a floor lamp for drama, a table lamp for tasks, and battery-operated sconces for mood. It creates pockets of light that make the room feel like it has multiple dimensions. Have you ever noticed how a solid wood desk can look like a giant boulder in a small room? To fix that, I chose a glass-top work table with slim metal legs. Because you can see through it, the piece has almost zero visual weight. It's there when I need to answer emails, but it practically disappears when I'm trying to relax and watch a movie. We all love plants, but a jungle on the floor is a tripping hazard in Brooklyn. My solution? A vertical living wall using a simple wire grid. By taking the greenery up the wall, we saved precious floor real estate while still getting all those oxygen-boosting benefits. Doesn't the room feel more alive when the nature is at eye level? Dining in a studio usually happens on the bed, but we deserve better, right? I tucked a small bistro table into a corner that most people would have left empty. By using ghost chairs made of clear acrylic, the dining set doesn't visually clutter the space. It's a functional zone that doesn't take a bite out of the room's openness. The closet in this apartment was, well, optimistic at best. Instead of fighting it, I installed a beautiful brass clothing rack in the main room. The trick is to treat your clothes like decor. By hanging a curated color palette of coats and linens, the rack becomes a textural element of the design rather than a sign of a storage failure. don't make the postage stamp rug mistake. A small rug makes a small room look even tinier. I chose an oversized jute rug that goes almost wall to wall. It acts like a stage for the furniture, unifying the space. It feels intentional and grounded, rather than like a collection of random items floating in a sea of hardwood. We've all heard that mirrors open up a space, but the placement is everything. I placed a massive arched mirror directly across from the only window. Why? Because it literally doubles the amount of natural light and borrows the view of the Brooklyn trees outside. It's like adding a second window without calling a contractor or losing your deposit. Kitchens in these old Brooklyn buildings are often just a wall of cabinets. To make it feel less kitchen-y, I removed the cabinet doors and styled the shelves with ceramic bowls and cookbooks. When your dishes are beautiful, they become art. It turns a utility zone into a curated gallery that blends seamlessly with the living area. Nothing kills a vibe faster than a spaghetti mess of black power cords. I used decorative cable boxes and cord clips to hide every single wire along the baseboards. When the lines of your apartment are clean, your brain feels calmer. Isn't it amazing how much bigger a room looks when there isn't a tangled mess in the corner? In a tiny home, loud patterns can get overwhelming very fast. Instead, I play with textures. Think chunky knit throws, linen curtains, and velvet pillows. It gives the room richness and a high-end feel without the visual noise of a busy floral print. It's about creating a space that feels expensive, not loud. In Brooklyn, every ledge is an opportunity. I added a wide wooden board over the existing radiator/windowsill to create a breakfast bar. It's now my favorite spot to have coffee while looking out at the street. Are you looking at your windowsills as storage or as potential bonus furniture? I decided to paint the ceiling a very pale, glossy blue. It's a classic trick that mimics the sky. The gloss reflects the light coming in from the window, making the room feel like it has no lid. It's an unexpected detail that always starts a conversation when friends come over for drinks. Most people leave corners empty or fill them with a trash can. I tucked a vintage tallboy dresser into a dead corner. It provides 6 drawers of storage in a footprint of only 2 square feet. When you're living small, you have to hunt for those dead spots and put them to work. This is a bit of a designer secret. I use different scents for different areas. A citrus candle by the kitchen and a lavender mist for the bedding. It sounds extra, but it creates a sensory boundary that tells your brain you've moved from one room to another. Who says you need walls to define a space? Instead of drilling holes in these old Brooklyn plaster walls, I lean my larger art pieces. It creates a relaxed, editorial look that feels very New York. Plus, it allows you to swap things around whenever you get bored. Flexibility is the ultimate luxury when your living situation is permanent-ish, but your space is limited. Small apartment bathrooms are usually the saddest rooms in the house. I added a teak bath mat and some eucalyptus hanging from the shower head. It's about shifting the narrative from I have a tiny bathroom to I have a private spa. A few intentional upgrades can change your entire morning mood. In every small room, you need one hero piece that is intentionally oversized. For me, it's this giant, sculptural paper lantern. It draws the eye up and makes a bold statement. If everything in the room is small, the room feels small. If you have one big, brave piece, the room feels confident. Bookshelves aren't just for books, they're for negative space. I leave about 20% of the shelf empty or decorated with a single small object. If you cram every shelf to the brim, the room starts to feel like it's closing in. Giving your objects room to breathe helps you breathe too. At the end of the day, your home should look like you, not a catalog. I have a bowl of matchbooks from my favorite Brooklyn restaurants and a gallery of photos of my friends. Those human touches are what make a space feel like a home rather than a storage unit for your stuff. Seeing this transformation finished always reminds me that design is about problem solving, not just spending money. We took a standard, slightly awkward Brooklyn studio and turned it into a multifunctional sanctuary using logic and a bit of creativity. If I can do this in 300 square feet, imagine what you can do with your space.